My name is Diona Murray, founder of Bearing Fruit. Bearing Fruit is a movement born out of depths of my pain. It is a call to all those suffering, whether you're suffering with infertility, reproductive health challenges like fibroids, cysts, endometriosis, PCOS, whatever may be plaguing you where you feel like it is affecting your self-worth. Everything that we go through is not something that we have to deal with by ourselves or alone. Sometimes we have to talk it out. And I think it's very important that sometimes we also talk it out with a professional. Too many times our pain is silenced. Too many times we go through things alone because it's taboo and we can't talk about it. And while there's a lot of attention right now when we talk about the Black mortality rate right now, I think we just have to also back it up a little bit and start from the beginning. Not just when someone's ready to have a child should our life matter. Our life should matter before then. Our pain should be felt before then, or at least understood and heard. And so what you'll see today in full bloom, my story is not a secret, is others sharing their story, some for the very first time. And so I want you to listen. I want you to hear. I hope that maybe you see a part of yourself. If not you, it's someone else.
My name is Dr. Argie Wilson, and I am the founder, co-founder, and CEO of Faith Connects, which stands for Family and Individual Therapeutic Healing. I am also co-founder of Connections Matter with my husband, Morgan E. Wilson Jr., and we just started a nonprofit called Mental Health First Connects. And I can't think of a better place to be but here with you. Part of my life has been committed to helping people heal, right? We believe that we heal families one relationship at a time and transform lives one courageous conversation at a time. And I have a book out called Courageous Conversations Connect. So today, we're going to have a courageous conversation. And Diona and Brian teed it up nicely with regards to what it looks like to be in full bloom, right? And so what I think about in terms of this conversation is you all are in the healing space. We are all in the healing space. And we're going to have real talk with real stories for real healing. And who better than the people who have had experience with infertility? And as a relationship therapist, I know only too well because I've talked to lots of people who've been on a journey like you. And just like you all talked about, like maybe you weren't ready to talk about it back then, but now you're in a place for such a time as this to share with others. And so let's get into it. Let's get into the conversation right now, right here, for the healing of other people. So if you could share with me, we've got Kathie and Barry, and we got Tanisha, and we got Kim. And I'm going to start off with having you all just share one thing about yourself that you want the audience to know with regards to your journey. Maybe 60 seconds or less. We're going to start with Kim.
Start with me. I'm Kim Gunter, and I am the mom of 2 angel babies, and I am proud. They are Sunshine and Daniel. I gave them names. I lost them in pregnancy, both, and I think it's real important to name your children. So I am the proud mother of 2 angels, Sunshine and Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And Tanisha?
My name is Tanisia Murrell. I am a foster mommy of 2 beautiful children, one who is 17, another one who is 19 months. I unfortunately cannot share names, but I'm in the process of adopting both of those children. And so I'm super excited about that. Still on the journey. I have fostered 7 children within the last year so far. But it has been a beautiful, messy, challenging, but wonderful journey.
Wow, thank you for that. And Kathie and Barry?
Yeah, so our story is very interesting. We are now happy to say we are mom and dad to 3 little girls. We have a set of twins that are 10. Our youngest is 9, and we've been on quite a journey to have these beautiful babies. So I'm happy to be on this side of the journey, being able to share my story in a more positive light, and I've embraced the tough times. So it's really nice to be on this side of the fence.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so when we think about like the trauma of our lived and shared experiences, when we think about pain, I kind of believe that we turn pain into power when we appreciate the process. And you talked about your journey, right? You talked about being on this journey, this IVF journey. From my understanding, and if you could share a little bit about that IVF journey, because for the two of you, it began even a little bit before you all came together in terms of loss, right? And then you began that journey, but probably not sharing it with everyone. Was that a hard experience for you? Was it an easy experience for you when really you think about like what that sharing looks like?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'll be fully vulnerable. This is my first time sharing our story. It's come from a place where I just always felt like I had to protect myself, right? Like, it's like, this is not an easy place to be, where your body's supposed to do what it's supposed to do, right? As a woman, right? You're supposed to be able to have kids naturally. It shouldn't be like hard. But my story began when I first moved to Philadelphia. I'm originally from New York. And my husband and I were living together. We weren't husband and wife at that time. And so we got pregnant, and we were excited but scared about the pregnancy because I was in my early to mid 20s, more like mid 20s. And so we were excited about this journey, and it ended up being an ectopic pregnancy. And it was traumatizing in the sense that timing was awful. I mean, timing is never good with that, right?
Never a good time, right?
Never a good time. And so Barry was actually in his best friend's wedding, and he had to travel to Atlanta, so he had to leave Philadelphia. I'm in the process of going through an ectopic. I went in for a checkup, and then they told me, you need to stay, and you know, it's not a full pregnancy. And so I fought that a little bit, because I'm like, what do you mean it's not a full pregnancy? So fast forward, I got a second opinion that same day, and then was hospitalized. And I'm in a city where I don't know anyone. My family wasn't there. So I had to call home, like, Mom, Dad, like, I'm pregnant, but I'm not. I'm at the hospital. I'm having surgery. I can't have the baby. And they were like, what in the world, like, is happening? Let me go get my baby girl. And then I had to explain, Barry's at a wedding, so he's not here. He wanted to be here, but he couldn't. So that was a tough time for us in terms of getting through that process. And at that point, I'm like, I don't know if motherhood is for me. And so instead of focusing my energy on other things, I focused it on work, because I'm like, I can bank on my hard work, on my strong work ethic. That's gonna.
You can get validated for that.
I will get validated for that. I will find value in that. I will find this is my path, right? Motherhood is not for me. I will be the best auntie ever. I will, be involved in everybody else's kids. So fast forward, Barry and I decided that we did want to get married and we did want to have kids. And at this point, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's. He was on his deathbed, unfortunately, and I felt like that was an awakening for me. That was like, oh man, family's important. Like, I can't keep working as hard as I'm working. Yes, we're living a great life together as we got to travel and check out the world together, but it brought me back to my values, and it was his family. And I was like, I don't have a family. Like, I don't have my own kids. And that weighed on me because I said I wasn't gonna cry, but of course I'm gonna cry. It weighed on me because my father was all about family, right? We're all about tradition. And for me to be in this place where I was ready to have kids and I wanted to have kids, but I couldn't have kids. And then my father died. And I was like, dang it. He never got a chance to meet my babies. But everything happens for a reason. It was a pivotal moment in my life. And it was one of those things where I had to take a hard look. I lost my job. I was in the process of finishing school, which was another 10-year journey for me. But, through that, I really had to have honest conversations with myself. Like, what is important to me? And so we went to see a fertility specialist. And she was like, oh, you're fine. You're in good hands. We got you. We'll put you on Clomid. Things are going to work out. Got pregnant. Great. Went for a checkup, another ectopic. And we were actually together at that time, so, but Barry had to leave because he had a business meeting that he couldn't get out of. And so here I am at the hospital again, alone in the same process. And I'm like, how did I end up here? Like, how did this happen again? And I was like, motherhood's not for me. It's just not. And so I just let it be, and my fertility specialist said, we're not giving up. you are the perfect candidate for IVF. Let's do it. And I'm like, no, I don't, I'm just still getting over this ectopic. It was my second one. I'm still mourning my father. Like, I'm not in the space. And then I quickly realized that my insurance, my work insurance covered 70% of the IVF process. And it was about to lapse within a couple months. So I'm like, okay, it's now or never. I'm either gonna take this leap of faith. So I don't want to be in a place later on in life where I look back and say, I had a chance and I didn't take it. And so I know that was the journey for me. It was a hard decision to make, and I just took the leap of faith, but it was definitely a conversation. I don't want to take over, the experience, because you have your own experience to tell.
No, I think you sort of spelled it out exactly right. As the husband and the partner, what I learned through all of that is just to stand by my wife's side as best as I possibly could. I guess the traumatic experience for me is when we had our first ectopic, and I'm a million miles away, and I get a call, and there's absolutely nothing I could do. Like, even if I hopped on the next plane, the procedure would have been done. And so feeling that sense of helplessness, especially we went from a place of like joy and excitement. We weren't married at the time, but we were like, we're gonna make this work. And so, and then that happens, and I just wasn't there. And I said to myself that I don't ever want to be in that position again, to the best of my ability, right? You cannot predict what these things are going to be like. And then fast forward, we're trying to have a child. And I was naive. I was like very naive. I was like, oh, it's gonna happen.
It's gonna be easy, right?
We said we're gonna do it.
Let's go for it.
This time happens. And it dawned on me as we tried and kept trying that it's truly a miracle. And her father I consider my father. And so when he was in his last days, I also felt the pain of not being able to bring life into the world while he's here. And my parents were like, my dad passed away before he even met Kathie. So I know a little bit about what she was feeling. And so in that year, so much had transpired. We lost, our father, we got married, we had another ectopic, and we were just sort of at our wits' end. And to your earlier question, we did it in isolation. And I don't know if it was by choice. Things just kept happening, and we just had to roll with the punches. I think we're of the generation where we just roll with the punches. Like if things get hard, we work harder. And I think my wife, Kathie, myself, we just threw ourselves into other things and really didn't think about the healing process. But when we got to that last ectopic, I think we were both ready to throw in the towel. And I said to Diona earlier, I was like, this is where the warrior spirit in my wife kicked in. Now she sort of chops it up to like it was going to cost us some money and healthcare, but we could have just sat on the sidelines. We could have figured out the money part. We didn't have to do it then. And she decided that she wanted to do it right here, right now. And I couldn't be more proud of her. Just being there to watch her go through all the stuff. I mean, again, just not knowing, what is involved in all of it. I mean, the pills and the poking and the prodding and the doctor's appointments. There's no amount of preparation for that.
Yeah.
And so just being, for me, it was important to just be available, to be her support system whenever I could be, and take as much weight off of her shoulders as I could. But what I learned with IVF is that there's a lot that your wife is going to shoulder alone. And so all I could do is just be her support and safety net whenever possible, and put my faith in God's hands. And thankfully, we were blessed not with one, but 3 beautiful babies.
So you had twins,
Yeah.
And then shortly after you had twins, then you got pregnant without IVF, correct?
Funny you should ask. That's exactly
Funny
what happened. So my body was like,
Twins, I think they call it, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly. My body's like, that's what's supposed to happen. But yeah, so going through that IVF process was a big decision to make. And I was I'm not a very vulnerable person, which is why I'm 10 years into this journey and I'm now sharing my story. But it was a hard decision to make, but for me it was very much like it's now or never is what it felt like. And I'm like, I'm never gonna be ready. this is it. This is my one and done. And so when we went through that process, it was a very difficult process. I mean, I had a box of medication that I actually had to chase down because the UPS driver didn't deliver it. And I was on a time, I was like on a time schedule to take medication. And so fast forward, once I opened this box of medication, it was overwhelming because it's needles. There's a lot that goes into it. And then a spreadsheet of a very timed, outline of when I needed to take certain medication, when I needed to be poked and prodded. And so that was a journey in itself. And I'm like, being that I'm on this journey, I might as well freeze some embryos in the case that we want to have more children. I'm like, probably not, but in that case, because I went through that process, I'm gonna freeze some embryos, and then out pops my youngest baby. Naturally. Wow. I did not plan for it. I was 6 months pregnant of the twins, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, here we are. So.
Wow. And so thank you for that, because I do believe you mentioned that it would, bringing life into the world is a miracle. And I also think it's a spiritual healing process that can either bring you together or split you up. Yep. Yeah. And it sounds like it brought you all closer together.
Yeah.
The reason for this conversation, for this journey that we're on, is to heal other folks who might be going through something similar or something different, or they may have a whole different experience that they've been through, but it's still a journey for them around bringing life into the world or caring for life. So I want to go to Tanisha and ask you about this whole foster care process, right? Because mommies and daddies and motherhood and fatherhood and parenthood, all of that guardianship and literally caring for another human being or other human beings, it comes in different packages. And we don't really know that. You mentioned that, Barry, in terms of being somewhat naive. We don't even understand what it cost us or what the process is. But then when we're on that journey, we get to a place where we begin to feel like this journey is worth it no matter what the process. And so I want to hear from you. I think the audience wants to hear, what's this foster care process all about? And can you incorporate the cost of loss in the process?
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So for me, this probably started when I was 15. So I grew up in a 2-parent household, 3 other brothers, it was 4 children in the house. We had a full, joyful, messy house growing up. And I've always known I wanted to be a mother, right? And I remember my parents, with 4 kids, my mother wanted to foster or adopt. And I remember seeing this little magnet on the refrigerator with this beautiful little black boy that said foster care. And I remember asking my mom about it, like, what is that? And I remember her explaining to me how children end up in foster care and why, and being devastated, like heartbroken for months. And I remember then telling God that I was going to foster and adopt. Like, that was the way I was going to build my family with my husband, right? I would have, we always have a plan, right? So I was going to have 1 or 2 kids and then foster and adopt some kids. And then fast forward as life goes on, things happen. And in my 20s, I was diagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome. And was told then that I could have challenges having children and maintaining pregnancy. But even with that, I didn't lose hope. Was diagnosed with fibroids. Okay, no problem. But for me, it was waiting for a husband, right? Like trusting God for my husband and just living this full, abundant, single life. And then 2020 hit and we were all home. And I remember in my quiet time with the Lord, him whispering, why are you waiting? And I'm like, I'm waiting for him, whoever him is, you send him, and then we can do this. And he was like, no, you don't need him. You've done this previously, not officially, but I had raised my nephew. There was a teenage girl in my church who had become displaced. I had taken her in, and I had raised her. And so the Lord was like, you've done this before as a single mom. Why are you waiting? And I'm like, okay, let's, so started the journey. And I remember reading in Isaiah 54 about the barren woman and how she will be the joyful mother of many. And how in that scripture talks about stretching out your tent. And so I felt like the Lord was saying, sell your home, buy a bigger one. So I started the process. And so last year, moved into my home. Actually in 2021, moved into my home. My home was officially opened in the foster care system, and I began fostering as a single mom. And it is interesting because as a single woman, people were looking at me like I'm crazy. Like, I have a great job. I was traveling the world. I've spent 7 years as a short-term missionary advocating for girls and women across the globe, doing all these wonderful things. And it's like, okay, now you're gonna like parent as a single woman. But I knew that my mother's heart was calling me to it. And so I started that journey. My very first placement, I'm gonna try not to cry.
Listen, you don't have to try not to cry here. Tears are good for the soul. We express it.
Yeah, was a 7-day-old baby boy who I joyfully accepted. This was maybe a little more than a week before Christmas. And they were like, they were working on a family member who would be the guardian, but it may take a month or so before that happens. Okay, no problem. And so I'm caring for this little boy, and a week later I get a phone call out of nowhere to say, hey, the judge granted the maternal aunt guardianship. How soon can you have him ready? And I was like today? Like today, you want me to? And so in an hour, I'm packing him up and saying my goodbye. When that door closed, I think I told God in that moment, I was like, I can't do this. Like, it was 7 days, and in 7 days, my heart got attached to this baby. And I remember thinking for 2 weeks, I could smell him. Like, I could still smell him. But the Lord reminded me of my desire to live my life to honor him, fully honor him. And in those 7 days, the prayers that I prayed over him, I fully believe that God will honor. And so that was intentional. And so for me, loss is happening in multiple ways, right? I have not had the opportunity to try to have a baby. And so in this waiting, and the older I get, the closer I feel the barrenness of it all, and the loss of children that come into my home, loving them fully like they're mine, but also holding the fact that the goal is reunification, right? So that means loss and heartbreak for me, but joy for them. I think one of the things that I've uncovered very recently is also this sense of rejection that can happen because you're not the bio parent, and they're longing for that bio family almost feels like loss and rejection to you. And so all of those things, I feel like are a continual, like this continual loop of loss that I'm constantly offering back to the Lord to allow him to fill me up again so that I can love the children that are there and the ones that will soon come.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you need some tissue?
Yes, ma'am.
Some tissue. I feel your joy and I feel your pain. I feel that loss and I feel the gain. The gain that happens between you and those beautiful children that you get to give the gift of you and the gift of motherhood. And it is such a powerful sacrifice. Thank you. I knew that this conversation, there would be some tears shed. And as a therapist, I'm kind of used to that. Many people sometimes wonder why I don't offer tissue right away. But oftentimes, I do believe that we need to purge. We need that expression. We need the tears to flow. We need to be able to purge those experiences because that's a part of the healing process. And I thank you for that story because that story is going to bless so many. And
Yeah.
our journey is not over. We're just connecting and we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Kim, you have a book,
I do.
Sunshine
Indeed.
and Daniel. And your book is really a culmination of your life story around pain and loss and joy and giving of a gift. And so I want you to share your story from the prism of these diverse stories of birth and loss and gain. Can you share your journey with us?
Sure. Very much like you, I always wanted to be a mother. I knew as a little girl I wanted to be a mother. And I just assumed, like you, that's just going to happen because I'm a woman. Women are supposed to have children. And I really thought, I grew up in a church that was geared women towards being what women are supposed to be. So, and I have feelings about that, but that's not this conversation. But I just assumed that I was going to be a mother. I assumed I was going to get married and all that stuff, all the stuff. I had it planned. I had how many kids I was going to have, you know, what, like how old I was going to be and all of that stuff. Yeah, oh, please, of course, their names. I knew the father's height, everything. I knew everything. And as I was getting older, that wasn't happening. Well, I went to college. I'm skipping over my story. So I went to college. I was very naive. Grew up under my brother, who made sure nobody talked to me and my sister, which made me think that I was ugly, right? That's why they weren't talking to me. So I didn't know my brother put the fear of God in all the guys in the neighborhood. So I go to college, and this is the first time that I'm away from home, and this guy who played on the basketball team was interested in me and brought me gifts and all this stuff. First time it ever happened. I ended up getting pregnant my freshman year in college, and my parents were not happy about that, and I had an abortion. And I remember that summer, my best friend, we've been friends since I was 6 years old, and she would check on me and just kept checking on me and was like, it's okay, I don't care what's going on, I love you, my girl, whatever. And I begged my father to let me go back to college. I wasn't going to disappoint him again. He told me he was not proud of me. And I went back to school. He let me go back to school. I went back to school, and I became a Christian a few years later, and I thought that God punished me because at that time, the time that I had, this was in the 80s, so at that time, Geraldine Ferraro was running for vice president. They were talking about abortion and how abortion, they were throwing stuff at abortion, people who had abortions, calling women murderers, and I started feeling like God was punishing me. I later found out in the 90s, I found out I had fibroids, didn't really know what that meant. Didn't know what it would mean for me. September 11th happened, and I was dating someone. We've been together for a few years. I wanted to get married. He was not so sure. And when September 11th happened, he was moving towards getting married. I had been on the pill for years. I stopped taking it, right? Because I figured we're going to get me planning everything. We're going to get married. I want to be able to get pregnant. Well, I got pregnant immediately. We weren't ready for that. And found out that the fibroid was growing faster than the child and was taking the blood supply and everything. I was in and out of the hospital the entire pregnancy, had to go off work, go on, and was not put on bed rest, but I always thought I should have been. Because that's one thing, when you lose a child, you figure out everything that you should have done, even though there are doctors for that. But I assumed that I was going to be all right. And my best friend was pregnant at the same time, right? So we were like, how is this? Like, how is God letting this happen? We're having a baby at the same time, and they'll be best friends and all this stuff. I planned everything. I planned everything. So January of that year was 2002. My best friend has her baby. I had been in and out of the hospital. I had been laying on the floor at home in pain. I had been throwing up all the time, headaches, sinus, whatever bad pregnancy stories you hear, I had them all. And she had the baby. That was in end of January. Beginning of February, I am in the bathroom and this ain't right. So my boyfriend at the time happened to be at my house, took me to the hospital. And when we get there and the doctor's checking the baby, I notice there's no heartbeat. I notice that the heartbeat is really, really, really slow. And so doctor's like, Kim, you're losing a baby. And I said, okay. And the doctor tells me I have to go in labor and delivery. Okay, well, hold up, stop for a second. If I'm losing the baby, why am I going to labor and delivery? I had to deliver the baby. So I go, I have the baby, almost immediately, and it was a slow process because they had to wait for me to, and I was 20 weeks. They had to wait for me to, all the dilation and all that stuff. And I deliver, and within moments, they come in and ask me if I want to donate the baby's body. That's science. Just horrible, right? So I assumed that happened to me because 17 years before I had an abortion. And that was...
So you carried the pill.
Yes. And that was also faulty theology. But I just assumed all that years people told me I was a murderer. Maybe God don't like murderers, and maybe that's what's wrong with me and what's wrong with my body. And I was angry. I was mad at God. My relationship ended. So now I'm not a mother. I'm not a wife. And I'm not doing what I'm here to do. Like, women are supposed to do that. I later started working with some young people at the church. And I became kind of the youth. I guess, I don't know what they call me mom now, but I kind of started deciding that these young people are at risk. And the church was in North Philadelphia. And they've had so many different people in and out of their lives. I'm going to start hugging them. Now, if you know me, I'm not really a touchy-feely kind of person with people I don't really know that well. And I used to play around with them, like, you got to hug me, you got to hug me. And I have to tell you that scripture, I couldn't believe you said it, because it turned for me that I've had more children than my body ever, even if my body could have given birth, I never could have had as many. And now they're all having children, so I'm they call me Mom. I'm Mama Kim. I don't know if I'm all that cool with Mama Kim, because that sounds very old, but well, okay, I'll tell them. But so that, I in my early 40s, I found out the doctor, who was just great. I went in one day. I'd had to have the fibroids removed, and he did everything to try to save my uterus and not have me have to have a hysterectomy. But 6 months later, the fibroids started growing back. And he says, I'm so sorry to tell you, I'm coming in for my annual. And he's like, I'm so sorry to tell you that you'll probably never have children. And I'm like, I was here for something else. I was not here to hear that today. And I was like, okay, grin and bear it, because, I'm tough, I'm cool, I'm all that shaking. But I don't even remember how I got home that day. And I was just like, God, this is too much. This is too much. The one thing I wanted was to be a mother. How is this right? And over time, I just started to appreciate the young people in my life. So I've got them now, and I'm grateful.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. Thank you for that, Kim. And thank you for these stories, because this is going to bless other people, right? I want to shift for a moment and kind of move in the direction of secrets. Mm-hmm. They say secrets keep you sick. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes the reason we're having this conversation is to give people permission to heal through their truth. I like to call it, and I do say this in our book, Courageous Conversations Connect, 4 T's. Truth, trust, and transparency leads to transformational breakthroughs. But oftentimes we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves, and there's messages around what motherhood or fatherhood is, and that, if you don't bear a child, if you don't birth a child, then you can't be a mother or you can't be a father. I want to ask you if that resonates with you, holding a secret. And what would be, if you could tell your younger self a truth around secrets, what would it be as it relates to this journey that you've been on? What would you say? Because this is for someone else, not you, because you're beyond that right now, or you're growing through that process. But what would you share? And I'm going to go back to you, Kim.
you don't have to be ashamed of your story. I knew pretty soon after I had the abortion that I was going to write about it. It took me 21 years to do it because I kept being ashamed of it. Something would happen, and I would hear in my head, like, you can't tell that story. Nobody's going to be comfortable with that story. But every time I tell it, and I'm in a room, somebody comes up to me and tells me their story. Or I see a head shake like yours is, right? Like I see I know the look of a woman who's had an abortion who never told. So you don't have to be ashamed of your story, no matter who doesn't like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's good stuff. What about you, Tanisha?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking about it. To my younger self, I think I would have told her to advocate for herself and not be ashamed. So in the beginning of my infertility challenges, right, doctors dismissed things that I was saying, and you know your body, you know when something's not feeling right. And it took me a minute to find my voice and decide that I'm firing this doctor and I'm gonna search for the right doctors who will listen to what I'm saying and treat me, right? And so it took me probably 6 years in my 20s when I knew something wasn't right until I found the right doctor who diagnosed me. And that's just way too long. And I hear stories, you know, I've mentored young women for a long time, most of my adult life. And so now I'm talking to, you know, these young sisters in their 20s, like, listen, I know when you're 20, similar to both of my sisters here, like this, you know, of course I'm gonna be able to get pregnant, right? We spend so much time when we're younger trying not to, right? That we think it's gonna be so easy, you know? And then in my family, all of the women got pregnant like that. So I never imagined that I would have issues. But I talk to them now around like, hey, in your 20s, if you know that you want to be a mother, start having some conversations with your doctor, start asking some questions. And if it's a part of your insurance, get a fertility evaluation. I didn't do that until I was 40, right? And going through that process, I was going to try to freeze my eggs, and that's a whole nother story because I felt like went through the entire process, found out I had stage 3 severe endometriosis. I'm like, Lord, what else could I possibly have? PCOS, fibroids, and endometriosis. But my endocrinologist was like, but for your age, you have really great follicle egg count. So are we ready to move forward? And I remember sitting in her office and hearing the Lord say, no, this is where you stop. And I was like, well, wait, what? And so I'm bawling in her office, and I'm sure she's used to that, you know, as a fertility specialist. And I'm like, no, that's not it. And I remember sitting home like, really, God? Like, I just went through all of that. And he was like, do you trust me?
Yeah.
I was like, yes, right? I'm like, I have some choices to make here, right? And so I didn't do it. And so I'm trusting God for whatever that is. And so to my younger self, I would just say advocate, right? Like, advocate for yourself. You know your body. Don't let anybody tell you that or dismiss, you know, what's happening to you, and ask questions. I wish there was more conversations like this with older women, you know, growing up in church, sharing things that they've been through, that they experienced. And it's now that I'm older and I'm asking questions that I'm learning that people in my family have had abortions and miscarriages. I'm like, y'all, here I'm thinking every woman in this family just gets pregnant just looking at them. Why I have to be the one with issues? But clearly I wasn't the only one, so.
That's awesome. Yes, I appreciate that. And for your younger selves, what would you share?
I had a second to think about it as you were both sharing, and you know, I can relate to the stories in the sense of the shame that you carry. And so the word that keeps resonating for me is vulnerability. And it's because, you know, I come from Caribbean parents where when something goes wrong, you take it on the chin and you keep it moving. We're not gonna air it out. We're not talking about emotions and feelings. We're just like, you power through and you keep it moving. And so that's what I did. I hunkered down, I powered through, and I kept it moving. And I didn't share my story, and I didn't share it because of the shame that I carried. I come from a long line of women, and all of them, everybody's got babies. And I was the last one, and I'm like, there's something wrong with me. And the pressure that you feel being in those situations where you're constantly asked, when are you having babies? When are you having babies? And your mind is trying to process everything that's been happening. So vulnerability would be my word. Just being able to share that process early on to connect with others. Because once you share, I feel like people are more willing to share as well.
And I think as men, we have to also be more transparent about the journey. One of the things that I learned in our IVF process is that I have an average sperm count. And that's not something you share with your friends, like, hey guys, guess what? And so, but
over a cigar. Right?
Over a cigar, but knowing all the things that my wife was going through and how society wants to put all the pressure on women to do this miracle, I think it's important that we are vocal about, it's a two-way street, it's a partnership. We both have challenges to overcome in order to make this miracle happen. And I think the second thing I would do differently is just speak it out into the world that, I'm here to support you and love you no matter what. The baby doesn't make us. We are fortunate if we have a baby, but if not, I'm going to love you anyway. And I think that's something I probably should have said more out loud during the process that I would probably do more so now. So, but yeah, that
you still got time.
Girl, love you.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And so when we think about, we're talking about advocating, advocacy, right? And the infant mortality rate has skyrocketed. Maternal mortality skyrocketed, right? We as Black women and Black men are not listened to, even sometimes by our medical professionals who happen to be persons of color, right? Because there's this sort of implicit bias that actually becomes this internal messaging that somehow we don't experience pain like everybody else, that there's this invisibility, like we're not seen, we're not heard, we're not valued in the ways that we should be. We're othered, even when it comes to our own physical and, I would say, mental health. And so when you talk about being heard and not being visible and not being sidelined when it comes to your own health, what would you say about trusted messengers and even how to find the right doctor or medical professional? That's easier said than done. And then I want to add to that, like, not quitting, because sometimes it just becomes so daunting that we just kind of want to check out out of the process. So how do you stay in there? And I'm going to go back around this way, so I'm going to stick right here.
Oh, do you want?
I think we were very lucky. We had a really close friend of ours, Melody, who introduced us to our fertility specialist, and that's big for us in all things, like referrals and just, again, sharing our struggles. So if you want to talk about how that happened.
Yeah, and what I would say to that, to the advocacy part, when we were pregnant of the twins, I was on bed rest around 5 months. And so luckily enough, I was able to carry up until the very last day of 39 weeks. And so the babies came naturally. But when I went in for my checkup, it was right around Thanksgiving, and the doctor's like, all right, let's get you in. We will do a C-section. And I'm like,
that's right.
Are you kidding me? You had me on bed rest for 5 months.
That's right.
And now you want to do a C-section? And we both looked at each other and we're like, no,
yes,
we're not going to do a C-section. We waited this long. We're just going to wait it out. And we loved our doctor. We still love him. He's still our doctor to this day, my OBGYN. And I trust him, but my body was like, no.
You trust your body,
I
too.
trust my body. So it was like, it's advocating, right? That word. So
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
They
So
wanted
as
to
much-
induce the
They
week
wanted
of
to-
Thanksgiving. We're like, we're good. Like next week, we'll be fine. And a couple days later, we
Yeah.
actually went into
Yep.
labor. But it's something felt like we just followed our gut in that moment. Like it was like something just didn't feel right about inducing the pregnancy so late in the game at this point, and it felt like it was more of a convenience for his office than it was for our health benefit. So we were like, no, nope. And so,
Yeah.
you know, God had other plans, and
So yeah, so referrals and advocacy were part of our journey.
Referrals for sure, definitely.
Yeah. For me, I was thinking as they were talking community. And so I think these conversations are why it's so important, because there are people who have had experiences and doctors who can refer you or warn you against. So for me, in my 20s, you know, the gynecologist I had, and it's interesting that you said doctors that look like us, it was a black woman. And so I was excited to have this black woman as a gynecologist. And when I started having issues, I thought I was in perimenopause in my 20s. So I was really struggling, and went and had this conversation with her in her office. And she said to me, she was like, oh, you're 28. Well, in the next couple of years, your fertility is going to begin to drastically decline anyway in your 30s. I was like, I'm sorry, excuse me? What just happened? I'm 28, right? And so she was very dismissive. And I was like, you know what? I'm done, give me my records. And so I began having conversations with my girlfriends around doctors, and found this amazing, another black female doctor who had a very holistic approach and didn't believe in prescribing medication. And she was the one who, I went in her office, I didn't tell her what I thought it was. I just told her what I was challenged with, and she was like, and of course I'm like in tears, because at the time I was having hot flashes, my hair was falling out, my face was all broken out. My cycle wouldn't come for months, and then I would get it and have it for months. So all these things were happening, and she was so just supportive. And she was like, just take a deep breath. You're not in menopause. I think I know what this is. We're gonna figure this out.
Wow.
And sure enough, one blood test, she brought me back in and she said, you have something called PCOS. And here's what we're gonna do. Wow. And so to me, I mean, it was like, yes, this is it. I know my body. And it was interesting because she had an intern in there with her, and she turned to the intern, she's like, this is why we know medicine, but they know their body. And you listen to your patients.
There you go.
And so from that point on, it was all about my community and trusting what I know is happening in my body. And I'm back in the same situation now, older. My PCOS is not being regulated the way it used to be. And so now I'm in a fight again, right? With finding the right doctors who will help me get to the right solution. So it's community.
Awesome, awesome. And Kim?
So it's interesting. The doctor who did the abortion was the doctor who delivered me. So he was my doctor until he retired. And then the pregnancy, I was in school, so I was on public assistance, and that's where I found out at the community health centers when I found out I had fibroids. And then once I started working and I got pregnant, I found a healthcare providers, a team, and I was going to different doctors. Like it was one of the team members, another of the team members, and that's when I lost the child, and I never was comfortable with that care. I thought I should have been on bed rest, and and I still didn't know to advocate for myself. Some of the stuff that was done to me during that pregnancy, I would never allow it today. And then after I lost the child, I decided I'm not staying with these people. I went to Philadelphia Magazine and looked for a top doc, and I called. And I have thyroid condition, so my endocrinologist told me about a gynecological endocrinologist. I'm not saying it right, but I saw him. And I started treating with him, and he did the surgery to correct the fibroids. He was the one who told me that I probably wouldn't be able to have children. And he was just caring. He would listen to me. He wanted to know about my entire health. So even though he was the fertility endocrinologist, he wanted to know about my entire health. Every time I got anything done, he wanted them to tell him so that he kept track. And the interesting thing is I've been treating with him since 2002. And he just retired. And the day I found out that he retired, I had to take off work. I sat and cried pretty much the whole day, which was a couple weeks ago, because I now have to go through this again. I'm 56, And this journey is not over. I have to now, every time I go to a new doctor, I've got to talk about my pregnancies. I got to talk about my surgery. I have to talk about all of it. And I have to deal with that now. My primary care physician gave me a list of doctors, and the same day, because I was like, I need to find a new doctor. The list they gave me, I am sure on that list was the team that I lost the child with. So I was like, I won't really know until I'm in the doctor's office, and once I'm there, I'm going to feel it, and I'm going to be. So the whole day was just a mess. So I'm still looking for a new gynecologist. And I would say to anybody listening, advocate for yourself, but ask questions, interview them. Don't let them just interview you. Interview them. And if it doesn't feel right, don't stay there, because you're worth it. You are worth it.
Yeah, thank you. So advocacy, a village, your community, knowing your body, really understanding your value and your worth, right? And so this is a valuable conversation, as I said before, that's going to bless so many. I do believe that our experiences, they're meant to inform us, and then they're meant to inform others, but we do not have to be defined by them. And as we wrap this chat up, I'm going to ask you to share one word with regards to the spiritual connection that this journey has taken you on, that you will want to leave with this audience as a transformative message of healing and hope. And I'm going to go this way, that way.
My word is grace.
Grace. Thank you.
I'm going to say faith, because faith is the basis of trust, and trust leads you to rest. And that's what I've been doing, believing God for whatever He has called me to in this mothering journey, trusting Him with that, and whether I ever birth a child or not, He has given me the ability to be mother to many, and I'm resting in that.
Awesome. Love that, love that.
My word is power. There's power in the journey, there's power in going through it, and there's power in your voice. So my word is power.
I would just add to that, patience. In due time, whatever is meant to be yours, you will have, and whatever's in God's plan will be. And just be patient and enjoy the journey every step of the way, as much as you possibly can.
That's awesome. So grace, faith, power, and patience. Thank you, Kathie, Barry, Tanisha, and Kim. This has been amazing. Give yourselves a round of applause. This is awesome.